It might be old, slow, boring and a bit broken, but over the last 2 years this old Ford Fiesta has been the perfect car for me, and in this video I'm going to explain exactly why. But first, just a little bit of context. So about 2 years ago I found myself in a bit of a predicament. I just had to give my company car back, and that left me with a choice. Do I A, spend a load of money on a car that I actually want, or B, save that money with the view of hopefully putting it towards a house and buy a more cheaper car that would just do me for the time being? As you can probably see, I went with B, the more sensible option. But even so, with that in mind, I still didn't want to buy just the first car I came across, as I knew that I'd lead to me immediately regretting my decision. So when looking for my sensible car, I had a few criteria in mind. I wanted a car that I wasn't going to hate being seen in or driving, B, a car that I knew was going to be reliable, but C, it also had to still be incredibly cheap. Now by default, the fact that I wanted a cheap car meant I was going to end up with an old car. Now as for some people, the thought of owning an old car is enough to put them off completely. That isn't the case for me. I mean, I've owned a car with 250,000 miles on the clock, meaning that this, with its just over 100,000 miles on the clock, is still a relative baby by comparison. But going back to my point about not wanting to just buy the first cheap car I could come across, I believe that not all old cars are born equal. And by that I mean that whilst in some you might be slumming it a little bit, that isn't the case in this Ford Fiesta, because it is quite a high spec model. Obviously all things are relative, and this is no Rolls Royce, with features like an auxiliary in, automatic headlights, rain sensing wipers and automatic folding mirrors. It doesn't actually feel like I'm compromising too much when I'm driving around in this little old car. And that means that yes, it's old, but I don't think that is enough of a reason to call it rubbish. Now the second reason this car is rubbish is because it's slow. Now admittedly, this one does take some slightly more optimistic thinking to get around. I mean, the stereo fitted to this car is definitely more powerful than the 1.25 litre naturally aspirated engine under that bonnet. But you know what? That engine is actually one of the reasons I chose a Fiesta over some of the other cars available at this price point. And that's because it is a lovely little engine that actually quite likes being revved out. And that means every one of the, I think it's 13 or so seconds it takes for this to get to 60 miles an hour are actually relatively pleasant. This car also settles down into a very nice cruise once you're up to speed, and that engine is very quiet at 70. You can't really hear it working away in the background. Now another reason I chose the Fiesta over some of its rivals is because once you're on roads like this, it doesn't all fall apart and you don't feel miserable. This car has actually got some very surprisingly grown-up handling characteristics. By that I mean it is still comfortable, yet it also handles really nicely. The ride is a perfect compromise between firm and soft, and honestly it's really blown me away. To be honest, that combination of an engine that likes buzzing away and the surprisingly good handling are what makes this car, or is what's made this car be so good for me. It's meant that I've not felt like I've missed out completely when I get onto roads like this. Obviously it's no Caterham, but to be honest, for what it is, it's more than good enough, and that's why I think, despite being a slow car, it's far from a rubbish car. Reason number 3 that this is a rubbish car is because it's boring. You know what? Yes, it is. I admit it, this is a boring car. But that is actually one of the reasons that I was really looking forward to owning a car like this. And that's because in the past, when I've owned slightly nicer, more special cars, even though they've not been particularly exotic, I've always found they come with a certain underlying level of ownership anxiety. By this I mean that just silly little things become a source of stress. You know, I don't want to curb the wheels, I don't want to put stone chips on the bonnet, I don't want to put too many miles on it, I don't want to run it for short journeys without getting up to temperature, and I certainly wouldn't want to leave a nicer car in what would be classed as a slightly dodgy area. With this car, I've got none of those anxieties. It's just a car I use as it's been built to do and as intended, and that's been really refreshing. I honestly think that that's the one thing I'm going to miss most when I do inevitably get another car, just being able to use it without caring about it particularly. Obviously I don't go banging it up curbs for the sake of it, but during my time living in Birmingham, I do think this car has been absolutely perfect for me. I just love the fact it blends into the background and nobody gives it a second look, and I do think my car insurance would have probably cost about £1 million if I was driving anything slightly more special during my time in that city. Another advantage of owning a boring car is that when it was designed with boring things in mind, such as practicality. This is a small car, it's got a small footprint, yet despite that it's got a really big boot, and that's just made life a lot easier. So yes, this car's boring, but I think that is actually one of the most wonderful things about it, and it means it's far from rubbish. Now just quickly, I did say that this car was a bit broken, so let me run you through some of the things that don't really work on it. So we've got the electric windows, they both do work. However, the driver's side one is not very happy at the moment, and that is something that I should probably get fixed sooner rather than later. It does work, but it's just very temperamental going back up again. Moving across here, we have an electronic boot release. Oh, you can hear it trying, but it doesn't actually release the boot. And this is something that's been broken for as long as I've owned the car. I can still open the boot with the key, so it's something that I just live with. Moving across here, air conditioning, that doesn't work. It's not the first old car I've had with aircon that doesn't work, so it's not a massive deal to me. Although the combination of a window that's temperamental and no aircon means as we approach summer, I should probably look at getting one of those things fixed ASAP. As we move across here, the bonnet release, that's also very temperamental. I can get it open, but it's a case of me pulling on that while somebody pushes down on the bonnet, and eventually it will spring up. But yeah, that's just one of those annoying things that just seems to happen to old cars. Moving across here though, there are a few things that seem to be specific weak spots for the Fiesta. So these things that you pull to get the seats up, I would show you the one on the driver's side, but I'm sat in it. Neither of them work. This one did work until fairly recently, but yeah, it's stopped now. Bit annoying, but I can still get the seats down from where I'm sitting now, so it's not the end of the world as far as I'm concerned, because it's very rare that I carry more than just one passenger. And the final thing is there's just a bit of trim missing down here. Again, not the end of the world because of the type of car it is. So yeah, it's a bit of a list, and it does seem to be growing at a bit of a rate now, but some of those things I will probably carry on living with, like the aircon and the boot, whereas some of the things like the window and potentially the bonnet release will have to get looked at sooner rather than later. Otherwise, it's going to leave this car a little bit too broken to live with. So yes, it's old, slow, boring and a bit broken, but I still absolutely love this thing. Now, obviously, one day I would like to own something a little bit more special and a bit more sporty, but I know that time will come. And in the meantime, I think the fact that I've done more miles in this car and owned it for longer than any other car I've ever owned is testament to just what a reliable and perfect companion it's been to me over the last few years. It's also put me in a position where I can afford a house, and that is something that I should be eternally grateful to it for. To be honest, I don't think I give this car enough respect, but now I'm hoping you can see that while it is a bit of a rubbish car, it's actually been the perfect car for me. I've been Bleak, and I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, please remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.